So, a video was posted on YouTube earlier today in which an individual smashed the statue of Christopher Columbus in Baltimore. It's actually the oldest monument relating to him. And there was a bit of a debate as to whether or not this is practical. This is coming along the lines of the Virginia Charlottesville rally, or the Charlottesville, Virginia rally, whichever way you want to phrase it. And during the video, the individuals who are involved with destroying it, one of them makes the case that this is promotion of supremacy, and speaks about acts that were committed by him, and harkening back to what he did over his lifetime. And those are valid critiques, and those are things that need to be addressed, and those are things that I'm not going to fault him for knowing. The problem is when he mentions Washington alongside with him, you get into this thing where it seems as if people can't understand whether or not someone was racist or sexist or just any other negative form of terminology you might want to apply to them in the current day society. Those were not the viewpoints of that era. And even more importantly, you have to recognize the contributions of that person overall. So, for example, I or some other minority or African American or whichever form of referring to me might take offense to Washington owning slaves. But what has to be said is that he was the initial American president and founded many of the customs and ways of using that office, and generally was part of what became the U.S. democracy, which I think is one of the best in the world. Obviously, that wasn't entirely all just him, but nonetheless, he still heavily contributed to that by holding that office before anyone else. And really, this brings up the debate of, if you have an issue with something being somewhere, can you just get rid of it and just choose to completely throw it away? So, for example, let's pretend there was some Klan member that didn't like a statue of, I don't know, Malcolm X. They can go and destroy it because they didn't agree with his message or his way of living or his religion or things that were done during his lifetime. They shouldn't be able to do that. I don't think anyone else would agree with the assessment of destroying something because you don't like the person that commemorates or remembers. The fact of the matter is, there needs to be monuments and other small reminders of the people who have, for better or for worse, shaped the U.S. Um, Part of the reason they make films about Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin is not because we enjoy them as people or we think they're good people. We have to remember these events so they're not repeated in the past. You saw those comparisons of Hitler to Trump, or Trump to other various evil or fascist world leaders, and they're done, even though I don't personally agree with them, to promote the idea that you have to be able to see a person's full potential. So while he might not have appeared during the campaign to be a fascist, he might in office be a fascist. And here are some signs, as were done by other people who are now confirmed fascists. That's something that, even if it's not, I don't agree with the practice of doing it because I don't think the person it's being done to is ideologically a fascist. It still deserves to be heard for the fact that you have to be able to give a full picture. It's part of the freedom of speech that we have. And I think part of freedom of speech is freedom of expression. So having a monument of someone, especially a person like Washington, like Columbus, who contributed to the American history, needs to stay there. Um, and there are better ways of getting things addressed than acts of violence or destruction. I don't necessarily agree with some of the groups we have now, whether it be the current Democratic Party, but I'm not going to go to their headquarters where I live and just take a hatchet and start smashing the building. No, I'm going to address my issues with the party. I'm going to address my problems with its ideology and just hope that, someone will listen. It doesn't take a sledgehammer or some axe or some other weapon to cause change. Usually all that does is make you look even worse, because now your message is destroyed by the fact that you couldn't even just decide to talk about this. And what bothers me the most is that if you watch that video, he talks about why he doesn't think the statue should be here. He voices his opinion. He gives some level of understanding to the viewer as to why he feels that way. So if you could do that on the video, why couldn't you do that in a letter to the mayor of Baltimore or to the governor of Maryland? You know, these are things that they're so contradictory, and it's really disturbing because this man, you know, for what it's worth, even though I don't agree with what he did, he's not dumb. He's not stupid. He sat there and spoke relatively eloquently. Maybe it was written beforehand, but nonetheless, he was able to voice a concern with accuracy and with his opinion coming across. It was conveyed to me he is deeply offended by that statue being there. It was expressed to me that he was bothered by its presence. Those are valid ways of doing things and actually addressing issues. But for some reason, he can't just actually keep it that way. It has to be accompanied by some act of violence or some physical action that isn't, you know, peaceful, such as a protest, which a lot of activists in the current era have decided to do. And, you know, you can argue those are ineffective, but nonetheless, they show a level of restraint. There are things that bother people, that, you know, piss them off, that anger them deeply. And what they do is not, you know, attack those they don't agree with. What they do is not strike against whatever system they're opposed to. They go and they voice their opinion, and they try to find some solution that doesn't involve someone getting injured or some weapon being used or some act of violence, whether it be towards a person or property. And that's really what could have been done here. So it, you know, that video, you get the message, but you also get annoyed at the idea that, you know, apparently we're going to live in this society where if you don't agree with something, in particular a monument or property, just destroy it. That's the message that's being conveyed there. So let's say in 100 years, I don't know someone political. Trump has a statue of him in New York where he was born and, you know, lived for many years. If if my let's say, I don't know, great aunt or no niece or whatever decides that she doesn't like the statue, she can just go and get a hatchet and just destroy it. That's all right. It shouldn't be. So yeah, you have to. I just want those who, you know, think this is good to really consider to yourselves, anyone who doesn't like you, according to this logic, can go and destroy some monument or commemoration of you, whether it be your grave site, your you know, building, your images, whatever. That's scary. You know, people deserve to be remembered, whether or not they were good or bad. You know, we remember all of these different murderers so we can prevent future murderers. We remember all of these different fascists so we can prevent the rise of power of future fascists. Keeping his statue up reminds people actively of him and what he did, and tells us why we need to be better. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.